In this video, Jordan Peterson explains the connection between your goals and what you pay attention to.
If I'm concentrating on one thing, there's a lot of other things I'm missing, and some of those might be unbelievably massive. And then it's even worse, as Simon just demonstrated, which is if I'm concentrating on one thing and I'm paying attention for the possibility that something strange might happen, while I'm watching for the strange thing, other strange things that I don't expect will happen and I won't see them. Alright, so I like that demonstration because it's such a concrete presentation of the fact that we're dealing with something complex with relatively limited resources. Now it's kind of obvious if you think about it, because there's you and then there's the entire rest of reality, including the reality that's within you that you don't understand, but it's still something completely different to have that pushed in your face like that. Now, one of the, as I mentioned before, one of the propositions, basically up until the time this line of research started, was that you operate in the world with a certain set of assumptions. You see the world and you interact with it, and the things that you're interacting and that you see are real, and it's relatively straightforward matter to perceive them because there they are like things, and you can interact with them in a manner that produces a predictable outcome, and if something radical happens, you will automatically attend to it. So that was the proposition of psychological theory, psychophysiological theory, for a very long period of time, and it had a huge influence on fields like artificial intelligence before they discovered that it was virtually impossible to perceive the world. It's so complex that we can't really figure out how we do it, although, you know, in the last 5 years, tremendous strides have been made in having machines that can actually operate in the real world, which is something new and absolutely remarkable and amazing. So, but what the bottom line for this turned out to be that, no, you don't see the world. You see a subset of the world, and which subset you see depends on your intent. Now, of course, that's obvious from this video, right? Because your intent when you're watching the video is to count the number of balls that are being passed back and forth, and that intent occurred merely because I asked you to do that. And so one of the things that that indicates is how easy it is for you to shift what your goal is. You know, and human beings are unbelievably good at that. Now, for most animals, goals are driven in some sense by the operation of underlying fundamental biological systems. They're not just goals, they're whole schemes of perception and action. They're like little sub-personalities, I would say, in that they're embodied, perceptual, cognitive, and emotional solutions to classic biological problems. So they're like, it's like an animal's head is full of little robots. And it's not like they're driven by a motivational system. The motivational system is a sub-element of the animal that participates in the entire animal's being. So if an animal is hungry, then it sees the things that hungry animals see. And it responds emotionally to the cues that are associated with food or its absence. And it thinks, insofar as an animal thinks and strategizes, and some of them do, like the hunters in particular, the pack hunters, then it strategizes from within that framework. And so you can't think about it as a drive, you have to think about it as an entire way of looking at the world, and then you kind of have to think of the animal as a collection of different ways of looking at the world in accordance with the different problems that the animal has. And then you're like that too, except as your cortex grew radically over the last several million years, you underwent this same weird transformation where your time span got extremely broad and your capacity for abstraction increased. And one of the consequences of that was that you learned how to replace what you might regard as purely biologically determined, relatively immediate goals, although they're really personalities, with unbelievably abstract goals that could be manifested in a social environment and that might work over very long periods of time. And that's a whole different thing. And so what the upshot of that is you have a system that allows you to formulate virtually any frame of reference imaginable, and then to look through the world and act on the world in accordance with that frame of reference, so that I can just say to you, your task, now this is going to be something you value, your task is to turn yourself into a personality for whom counting the basketball throws for the next 5 minutes is your primary aim in life. and you do that no problem. You reconfigure your entire perceptual system so that you feel inadequate to some degree if you can't perform the task. You're motivated to do it. You focus your perceptions. You're pleased if you can track the balls. You're pleased if you get the right answer. And you do that at the drop of a hat. So that's one of the consequences of human cognitive transformation. So now, what that also means is that from moment to moment, as a consequence of the varied goals that you're pursuing, you also make a determination of what you have to attend to and what you can ignore. And the answer to the question, what should you attend to and what can you ignore, is you should attend to the minimal number of entities necessary for you to produce the outcome that you desire. Okay, now, if you read classic cybernetic accounts of motivation, the ones that are cognitive, if you look at the behavioral theories of motivation, they're mostly drive motivations. So there's a deterministic element to them. You're in a state of deprivation, and as a consequence, you're driven down a certain behavioral road. Okay, so that's the behavioral idea. And there's some truth in that, because some of your biological subsystems are fast and ancient enough, so they do kind of operate as chain deterministic systems. And in fact, before you act in any complex way, you actually set up a system of chained deterministic events so that you can implement the action. So I can show you an example of that. So, all right, so you'll watch what my arm does. Okay, so you see that I accelerated it very rapidly, and then just before I hit the surface, I stopped it. Now it turns out that I can move my hand so fast that a new signal from my brain can't get to my hand during the time I'm going like this. And so what that means is that I have to set that entire system of operations up as a ballistic movement and then release it. And you're doing that all the time when you're dealing with the world. You have systems that are automated and that run in a deterministic manner, and what you're doing in part when you act on the world is you're disinhibiting them one after the other. So you do that when you're driving, for example. Where do you look when you're driving? You don't look right in front of the car. Why? That's because you're going to run over what's there. So what good is looking there? If it's something's there, you're going to run over it. There isn't a thing you can do. So what you do is you look far enough down the road so that you can sequence automated actions as a consequence of your perception. And then they run, in some sense, they run ballistically. You can't control them once they've been implemented. And you're doing that all the time. Like you're wandering around on a platform of semi-automated systems. And your choice, in some sense, is the choice of which of those semi-automated systems you're going to implement at any given time.